This is a brief history of the ghost town known as St. Thomas, Nevada, brought to you by Ghost Town Wonders.
Hey, good morning. Today we're going to take a trip out to a place called St. Thomas, Nevada. It's an old Mormon settlement founded in 1865 at the confluence of the Muddy River and the Virgin River. It's about 65 miles north and east of Las Vegas, Nevada. We're going to go out there, enjoy the day, take some video shoots, and create a YouTube video. Got the trusty coffee for the drive. Let's go out and enjoy the day.
This is a pretty simple road, follow down to the St. Thomas Trailhead. Well, we've arrived at the lush, muddy river valley, or lush by desert standards. This is perhaps what it looked like back in January of 1865 when St. Thomas was founded. St. Thomas was founded by a gentleman named Thomas Smith and nearly a dozen Mormon men and women. Brigham Young called for a settlement along the freight route from the Colorado River to Salt Lake City. These settlers established a camp some 23 miles north of the Colorado River at the confluence of the Virgin and Muddy Rivers. It is said that when John Wesley Powell and the 5 remaining members of his crew, who had struggled through the canyons of the Green and Colorado Rivers, finally exited the Grand Canyon at the end of 1869, the first people they encountered were the Mormon settlers from this tiny community of St. Thomas. The Mormons knew of the Powell expedition, but they had feared that all the explorers had died in the Grand Canyon, so it was somewhat a surprise when they ran across these folks. A day after Powell's group appeared, alive but hungry, a bishop from St. Thomas arrived at the Powell camp in his wagon, carrying several dozen melons and many other little luxuries. Powell wrote in his travel journal that we are comfortable once more. We laid our dignified manners aside and assumed the manners of so many hogs. Let's take a short little hike down into this valley. We'll see what was left behind and the foundations that are still showing up in St. Thomas. I was able to find this fantastic key map showing the layout of St. Thomas as it once was, and it shows keys for those foundations that are still existing today. As we walk through this valley, we'll come up on many of these ruins. Nice little hike down into this little valley down here. It's known as the Muddy River Valley. At one time, Lake Mead actually covered a major portion of this area. But the lake is down so far that it's left a lot exposed, and the lake hasn't been this high in 20 years probably. Just give you an idea how bad the drought is in this area. So let's continue walking and see what's going on.
Nice, beautiful morning out.
In the early days of the St. Thomas settlement, the farmers tried to grow cotton. In a good year, the settlers would harvest up to about 5,000 pounds of lint, and that's the usable part of the cotton plant, after the seeds and leaves are removed. It takes about 1,470 pounds of freshly picked cotton to produce about 480-pound bales of lint. By the late 1800s, settlers in the area were planting a variety of grains, melons, and fruit trees, which flourished after the irrigation system was completed. Vegetable gardens provided much needed food for the hard-working families in the valley. St. Thomas had endured a storied history. Originally, as I had said earlier, it was settled by Mormon farmers from Utah who believed they were within the same state of Utah. Later, surveys revealed the land was entirely in the state of Nevada. Nevada was established and entered statehood in 1864, but Congress continued to make changes to its boundaries in 1866 and 1867. And one of those adjustments landed St. Thomas within the entire state of Nevada. Once it was determined that St. Thomas was in Nevada, the county tax collectors demanded settlers pay several years of back taxes in gold or silver coins immediately. The settlers had little faith that the tax payments made to Nevada would be used responsibly, and they did not possess the required currency, as payments to Utah and Arizona were made by informal bartering systems. The townspeople turned to Brigham Young for advice. He allowed them to take a vote to stay or go. The next day, in December 20 of 1870, the majority voted 63-2 to abandon St. Thomas. The original settlers departed, but because of the attractiveness of the area, St. Thomas was gradually repopulated over the next decade. Daniel Bonelli and his family remained in the area to operate the Bonelli Ferry along the Colorado River. He also operated a salt mine nearby and was a successful rancher. Bonelli invested in the irrigation systems that were already in place, so as people moved back to St. Thomas, he benefited enormously. This is a map that I found that was created in 1906. Shows the proximity of the Bonelli Ferry to the town of St. Thomas and a few of the surrounding salt mines. This is one of the first foundations I came upon as I was walking through this town site. According to the key map, it looks like this may be in the home of Fenton Whitney. This is perhaps the same home that you see here with the neighbors congregated. Life changed very little throughout the decades at St. Thomas as people dealt with daily struggles. Excessive heat and illnesses were all too common, but the settlers persevered. Neighbors helped neighbors with planting and harvesting and building. As you can only imagine how precious water is in these environments, the settlers, using picks, shovels, and scrapers, built an irrigation system from the muddy river to their fields and orchards within the community. By 1869, the system had been extended upriver to provide the town with a more dependable water source. The ditches and concrete-lined channels wound through the town, bringing water to the community. In these next few photos, you can see, for instance, that grate over the top of an opening next to this foundation here. That is something that the state put in to keep people from falling in. Those were known as a cistern, where they got their fresh daily water. Almost every one of the foundations that I ran across here had this cistern arrangement. These cisterns allowed people to draw buckets of water for their daily use. Each of them held several months of supply for water, which was then filtered through charcoal and sand. Sometimes they would send the smallest member of the family down into the bottom of the cistern each year to scrub the walls.
This structure right here is the concrete foundation of the Freynor House. Freynors were local farmers in St. Thomas. Looks like it was a pretty large house. See the steps up to the first floor. down below. I don't know if that was a full basement or if it's just been filled up and it was only a crawl space, but it looks like it was a basement full. Yeah, it looks rather large. I can only imagine what it must have been like, especially this time of the year. Very beautiful around here as far as temperature goes. Beautiful blue skies, but the summers must have just been brutal. I've lived in Las Vegas for a number of years now, and it's hot in Las Vegas, and it's a lot hotter down here.
This is the Freynor House in the 1920s. That structure right there was known as the Hanning Ice Cream Parlor. It was built by Reinhold and Selina Hanning, and they also built a grocery store there. But it also was referred to as the Arrowhead store.
They even had a fueling station. You can see that's the pump head for where the gasoline pump used to sit.
This is a historical photo of Hanning's grocery store, Arrowhead store. Here's an account by Carrie Hanning Anderson, the daughter of Hanning. My father bought a piece of property on the highway, Arrowhead Trail, and built a service station where he sold gasoline, homemade ice cream, homemade root beer, and groceries to the passing tourists.
This right here was a blacksmith shop in St. Thomas. Pretty big building, large foundation. The structure in the background over there is the grocery store and ice cream shop. Here we are at the schoolhouse. Roaming around checking out the main stairs. Schoolhouse was built in 1915. Had kids going to school here until 1934 when the lake started to fill up. It was a two-story structure. Had classes K through 8. The other kids went to high school nearby Overton. The upstairs had an auditorium and like an event hall where they say they held dances and other activity. Walking around the school building, checking out the foundation, that's all that's left. And there's another cistern where they had their water source. I always enjoy looking at the methods of construction that they did. Some of these areas, especially the quality of concrete, had to be pretty difficult to maintain consistency because there really were no such thing as ready-mix trucks coming here. You can see the twisted rebar, which was reinforcing for the tensile strength. Concrete doesn't have any tensile strength, it only has compression strength.
Education was important to the settlers. Prior to the construction of the St. Thomas Schoolhouse, parents provided a variety of places for the children's schooling, including tents, parlors, and living rooms. The steps these children are posed on rose to a two-story masonry school building constructed in 1915. The structure consisted of 4 classrooms, a large auditorium, and a space upstairs for dances and plays. The school had 8 grades and was in session until 1934. I like the story of the students where they went to high school in nearby Overton. They bounced along in a converted Model T Ford truck lined with benches. Flora Keller remembers calling the bus the churn and having an uncomfortable ride over the rough gravel and dirt roads. The foundation you see there in the background, it was the first post office that was there in St. Thomas. You can also see tree stumps. There were many trees in St. Thomas, but when the federal government took over the land so that they could fill the lake, they chopped down all those trees so that the boats would not get caught up in the branches. This photo is showing the Bureau of Reclamation folks gathered at the St. Thomas Post Office in the summer of 1929.
This foundation right here is known as Gentry Hotel. It was a 14-room, 2-story hotel that was visited by some governors, even President Calvin Coolidge at the time, and Bureau of Reclamation when they were trying to survey the Hoover Dam. The foundations in the background over there, one is their grocery store, the Gentry grocery store, and a little bit beyond was the post office. You can see the cistern, which was typical of most all of the buildings here in St. Thomas, and it was used as a freshwater source. This one's pretty filled up. Across the way over there is the Gentry House.
This photo right here is of the Gentry Hotel. The Gentry family was very influential in this area. They owned and operated this hotel. It was a 14-room hotel. It was reported that several governors and senators, as well as President Calvin Coolidge, enjoyed the amenities of the thriving establishment. After the completion of the Arrowhead Trail, more guests stayed at the hotel, requiring Ellen Gentry to hire help. A waitress served the patrons in the dining room. Meals were prepared by a cook, and the cook's helper and laundry services were available. Harry Gentry was also the postmaster. He built a store next door to his hotel. This was a daily stop for most residents in the area who bought goods and shared news while waiting for the mail to arrive at the post office. Mining also brought prosperity to the community for several decades. Salt and sand were mined nearby. Minerals such as copper, silver, and gold were abundant in the mountains to the east of St. Thomas. During World War I, copper prices were high. But with the end of the war, the price of copper crashed, causing an immediate downturn in the local economy. The Grand Gulch mine was one of the more than 40 active mines in the area in the early 1900s. Wagons hauled supplies to the mines and returned loaded with ore. The official weight of the ore was taken at the Gentry store.
This is a Gentry House. You know, one of the reasons why you don't see much in the way of full-size buildings, you know, including the wood and any brick. There was plenty of time and plenty of notice given to these residents here that the lake was coming and was going to flood the area. Many of them dismantled their homes and moved them to other locations. The Gentry family was one of the more successful families in town. He owned a hotel, and he was the postmaster, ran the post office, and they also had a successful grocery store. So this is probably one of the reasons why you see this house so big.
In 1911, construction began on a spur line of the San Pedro and Los Angeles Railroad from Moapa to St. Thomas. Upon completion, trains arrived in the community pulling boxcars filled with commercial goods and refrigerated cars filled with ice for household use. At last, perishable food could be stored for longer periods of time. Residents were able to replace their wood wire and burlap desert coolers with ice boxes. Trains departed the valley with shipments of ore and salt from the outlying mining areas, along with fresh cantaloupes, watermelons, and other farm products for sale elsewhere. The fate of St. Thomas came about 1922 when the Bureau of Reclamation started planning for the Hoover Dam project and knew that the town was going to get flooded. St. Thomas never had any running water or electricity. It's a bit ironic considering that what destroyed the town was Hoover Dam, the largest hydroelectric generating plant in the world when it began operating in 1939. Furthermore, following a fire that destroyed the Muddy River Bridge along the Arrowhead Highway and a decision to construct the new bridge several miles north of St. Thomas along its current day Highway 15, the town saw its fate taper off into a quiet place. As the United States planned the construction of the Boulder Dam or Hoover Dam about 40 miles away, the government began to buy out the remaining property owners still living in St. Thomas. The cemetery was relocated to higher grounds in nearby Overton. Eventually, following the dam's completion, water began filling what is now known today as Lake Mead. The last known bit of mail is this postcard that was mailed out in June of 1938. There was plenty of notice to the residences whereby they had dismantled a lot of their homes prior to the floods. In June of 1938, a gentleman by the name of Hugh Lord, the last remaining resident of the town of St. Thomas, woke up, set fire to his home, and rowed a small boat away from the town. The town of St. Thomas, once a thriving Mormon farming and business town, and the location of a bridge across the Muddy River, had seen all of its land bought by the U.S. government, an action that would soon allow the inundation of the town beneath the waters of the newly created Lake Mead. For 64 years, the town of St. Thomas would remain submerged beneath the waters of Lake Mead, sometimes as deep as 60 feet below the lake surface. Over the years, persistent drought conditions caused the reservoir's surface level to decline, and in 2002, the remains of St. Thomas were exposed for the first time in decades. Well, this concludes my short and brief history of St. Thomas, Nevada. Thanks for watching. Hope you all enjoyed.